Welcome, everybody. My name is Professor David Lוי-פאור, and I am the chair, the entrepreneur of מעברים, a group that intends to promote professional development of research students. All is voluntary, and so is the lecture by my good colleague from the University of חיפה, Dr. Israel Wiesmel-Manor. Israel, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you for coming to this event. Hopefully, by the end of it, you'll learn a few more things about our profession, and I'll get to know at least partially some of you. Some of you are already presenting them yourselves, so it's good. Now, let me start by, first of all, sharing the screen, which would be beneficial for this specific talk. Here we go. And all right. Well, this topic, I hope, would become relevant to all of you, even if you haven't started yet to attend conferences and have made zero strides towards networking in your profession. But it's essential, it's crucial that you must understand that we as academics, we are not only judged by the work we do, and the assumption sometimes is, oh, if I'll just do amazing work, it's going to get published, and I'm going to be famous, and I'm going to get my Nobel Prize by the age of 35. And because the work is just amazing, at least my mom thinks so. All our moms think that our work is amazing. But we must understand that going into academia, we have a lot to learn from others. We have a lot to learn in the process about ourselves. And to do so, we need to meet with other people, engage with other people. And for that, we have conferences. And sometimes we think of conferences as the place where we go to enjoy perhaps a free meal or an exotic location, but that's hardly the case. Networks are essential to any advancement in academia. Nobody works alone. Even when you're Einstein, you are communicating with others, your findings, you're getting your thoughts of other people about your work. And we all do that today, except for the days of coronavirus, in which we are secluded and all of us are in isolation. But even in this special circumstances that we are attending today, many of the conferences have gone online, and actually I'm attending next month, this month actually, a conference in Australia without flying to Australia. So it's gonna be a bit weird, but that's the reality of the next few months. Obviously, all the things I'm talking about today are gonna be relevant in a few months, even if today you cannot attend an actual conference for medical reasons. Now, the basis for my talk today is a paper I wrote many, many years ago when I was a grad student at Cornell University, and I wrote this with Dev Gupta, a dear friend who's now at Carleton College. And it came out of the experiences we had as young professionals trying to make our first steps in academia, and our experiences in several conferences, both national conferences, international conferences, obviously in the field of political science. But I think that some of the lessons, or most of the lessons, are transferable no matter where you are, if you're doing physics or quantum physics, or you're doing anthropological work among, I don't know, the natives in Eilat. Okay, so without further ado, let us begin. So first of all, there are four things we have to consider when we think about conferences. One of them is why attend conferences. The second would be when to attend conferences. The third element would be where should I attend conferences. And finally, we'll get to the how to attend conferences. I put the $, but it's not just economics. It's much more than that. Hopefully, after we'll cover this in the next segment, we'll move on to discuss actually what to expect, what to do when you actually get accepted to a conference, which is the second hurdle you have to pass. But let's start with the first hurdle, which actually is talking about the process of getting in. So starting with the question of why should you attend conferences, there are many reasons why you should attend conferences. First of all, it's a great environment to get feedback on your research. The things you do, the work you have done, perhaps in wherever you're studying, be it the חיפה University, the Hebrew University, the Technion, the Weizmann Institute, there's only a few people that can actually understand your work, that know the field well enough to give you good feedback. Whereas if you attend a national conference, an international conference, there's going to be more people that are familiar with the topic, that at least are familiar perhaps with the methods or with the general environment in which you work, and they can enrich your work by giving you good feedback. And that's the first and the main reason you should actually pack your things and travel. Second, conferences are great motivators because usually humans are quite lazy. Not you, I'm speaking only about me. And if there's a chance of working on another regression analysis, or perhaps watching the latest, I don't know, a game by the Cowboys in football, or I don't know, the latest series on Netflix, sometimes Netflix has its appeal more than it should. And by having a conference and having a deadline and having to present, and you know it's there, it's great because you are actually going to have to do the work that you promised you'll do. Moreover, in conferences, you get to see for the first time what raw research looks like. Usually in your own field, no matter what it is, you get to see a paper and you take any paper. I don't know, this is from behavioral sciences, things that I do, and you get to see it and it's, wow, it's so clean and nice and smart and intelligent, and people are so prolific and the data is amazing. But it's never like that in the first stages. In the first stages, what you get is actually a conference presentations in which you get to see raw research, in which you see typos, in which you see errors, in which you see assumptions that don't fulfill. And it's kind of comforting to go to a conference and say, hey, I thought that, whatever, Joe Smith, he was brilliant. That presentation sucked. He was terrible. He was incoherent. The argument is flawed. It's full of flaw. And then you say, okay, I'm feeling a bit much better about myself, about my research. I can also take this raw material and turn it into a good paper, just like Joe Smith can do it. And it's great. You see the process going through. Moreover, when you go to conferences, you get a sense, especially if you attend the panels and not just go to the conference and go to the beach or to the sea, whatever, sightseeing, you get to see research that's done at the cutting edge of your profession. No matter where you go, you're going to see grad students and young professors that are working on topics that are exciting. And you can see where the field is going. So perhaps you're right now a new person to the field, and you're thinking what should be your dissertation, you have an idea perhaps, and then you see, I see that people are talking a lot about mixed methods. What is that? Mixed methods, perhaps I should do it. Or big data, I see that many people are doing big data. What's that all about? And Python, what's that? I should do, and then at least see what people are talking about. Obviously, I don't want to convert you to do something that you don't want to do, but at least you should know what the field is engaged with at this current stage. Furthermore, conferences are great CV enhancers. So a conference means that there was a parameter and people selected you upon other papers to attend this conference, especially if it's a prestigious conferences. For example, the American Political Association meeting, the annual meeting, has an acceptance rate of about 20–25%. So if you get accepted to that conference, it shows something good about you as a scholar. It's not like a published paper, but still it's nice to show potential employers in the future that you're engaging with the academic world, that you're part of the discussion, that you're part of an engagement with the culture of the profession. Furthermore, conferences are great for networking. And you could be just somebody who's just finished his master's, or you could be already a full professor working with amazing grants from the National Science Foundation. Everybody networks, okay? Everybody. Senior people love to learn what young people are doing, what's getting done, what's new. And new people want to get to know the older professors that can perhaps offer a postdoc or letter of recommendation or suggestions for future enhancements. So everybody does it. Moreover, it's a great way to practice before you actually go to the job market. Many of you are now in the last stages of your, early stages or last stages of your PhD. And when you go to a conference, it's a great place to come and say, here's my research, here's what I'm doing, getting feedback, getting a bit of a kick and understanding of how it works. And then when actually you'll get invited to some university, either in Israel or abroad, to present your work, then you'll be better prepared to present it. You'll be less anxious about it because you already faced the devil and beat the devil, and you'll be able to do it much more fluently and calmly. Finally, conferences are fun. Besides the academic stimuli and just the brain-opening mind to new science and to new methods and to new people, you get to travel. And sometimes you even get paid to travel. What's better than that? You are offered to be, I don't know, in Boston for a week for a conference, and you get to see the sights, do some shopping, meet some interesting people, eat some bacon. All the benefits of life are just in front of you, and you should exploit them to the fullest. So I hope I convinced you that travel and conferences are good. Now, when should you attend? Now, okay? This afternoon, if you're free, now. So you can go to conferences even without papers. Obviously, there's going to be no funding for you if you go without a paper, but especially conferences in Israel that you can travel and you can attend for almost free as a grad student. Go to any conference you can get. Go and listen. Go and learn. Learn from how people present. Learn from how people talk about their research. Learn the environment, the mechanics of it. It's a very comforting. Once you know how the mechanism works, the next time you'll come with a paper, actually you'll feel so much better that you know how things work. It's much like some of your TAs. Usually even now, as I'm a senior scholar, whenever I teach a class, I tend to go to the lecture hall I was assigned before the semester starts, just to feel okay with the environment, to see, oh, here's where I will stand, and I want to make sure that, oh, here's where the computer goes, here's where the student go, and it's very comforting. Second, if you go, and even if you get a poster presentation, that's fine. Many conferences today allow you to have a poster and not a full paper, and that's great because that's your ticket to ride. That's your ability to get there. Whatever gets you to the conference, just go. And some conferences today have a pre-conference. There's a pre-conference that's usually, if you don't get accepted to the regular conference, there's a meeting or a pre-conference based on themes or areas next to where the conference is going to be held. And sometimes there's a better chance to get accepted to the pre-conference than to the actual conference. Sometimes I find that my pre-conferences are more interesting and are attended better by more interesting people and more senior people than the actual general 5,000 people conference, because the pre-conference is usually thematic. So it's going to be a pre-conference on political behavior or political psychology. It's not going to be about political science. So it's going to be, I don't know, if you're a sociologist, it's not going to be about sociology. It's going to be about stratification. And that's great, because that's where you can get the most out of your attendance. If you're doing a PhD, you must do it. You must do it. That's the only way you're going to get to know people. You're going to be able to present your research. That's your only chance to perhaps secure yourself in the future a postdoctorate or a position. So don't hold back, and don't think like many people that I know, especially Israelis, that say, hey, the conference, I'll have to prepare for a week, and it's going to take me a week attendance, and it's going to take me a week of jet lag to just adjust back. So it's 3 weeks that I'm not working, and I'm working now on my dissertation. I want to finish in time. And people think, oh, I've lost 3 weeks. No, you didn't lose 3 weeks. You're earning what you should be doing. That's exactly what you should be doing. You should be attending conferences, because that's going to be perhaps what makes the difference between finishing your dissertation and just sitting at home, and finishing your dissertation and getting invited to a postdoc at, I don't know, the University of Pennsylvania. Finally, you can attend conferences even when you're presenting side projects. Many of us have side projects. So you started the dissertation, but at one point, I don't know, somebody in your department say, hey, you're the guy who does, I don't know, data crunching, right? You're good with numbers. So I have this project. Would you be willing to help me with this project? And I'll give you second authorship for it. And you say, sure. So you can present that as well. You don't have to present just your magnum opus, your biggest creation, your dissertation. It could be just something that you started working on with a friend during your PhD. It could be your master thesis that you polished and you got to a good shape that you can present it publicly. And that's fine. It shows that you're versatile. It shows that you are able to engage with several types of literature and methods. So don't think you're selling yourself short by presenting something that's not your dissertation. And that is good. All right, now where? First of all, there's national conferences and international conferences. Unfortunately, many of the national conferences that we have in Israel are weak. There are a few conferences that are really good. One thing that I could recommend highly is the conference for those of you who are engaging in things that have to do with politics or society. There's a grad conference organized actually by David, and it's so prestigious that people come from all over the world, from Harvard and from MIT and from Australia and from South America, and they all want to attend this conference because it's a really prestigious conference thanks to the effort put by David and many of the faculty in the Hebrew University and also across Israel that are willing to chip in and help this conference be successful. But many times the national conferences are okay. You would see more non-senior people than senior people. You would see more faculty from colleges and not from research universities. So the holy grail of conferences would be international conferences. And whatever your field is, I'm sure that you all are familiar with your conferences. So each profession has its own criteria, which are the best conferences, and some of them are strictly in America, some of them are touring the world, and sometimes they're in Europe, sometimes in Asia. But no matter where you are, it's important to go to those prestigious ones because there's so much more that you can learn from them. Some of these conferences are multidisciplinary, and then you would have general social science kind of conferences, perhaps, or general sciences kind of conferences. Usually these tend to be the least successful ones, and people, if they go to these conferences, they usually go because the location is nice. So it's in Hawaii or in, I don't know, in Sydney. But I would stay, for the most part, I would stay away from these ones. The ones you want to attend are the general ones in your profession. So the overall ones, so if you're doing a business, so there's the, how's it called? The Academy of Management Conference, which is the biggest one for business PhD students. There you're going to see thousands of people. Those conferences are just huge. Obviously, you don't get to know everybody and you don't get to play with everybody. You just go to the subsections in those conferences that are relevant to you. They are divided by subsections. Once you see the program, I'll get to it in a second. Sometimes you have specific conferences. Sometimes there are even thematic conferences in which you say, there's a conference on heteroskedasticity, and all people in statistics care about heteroskedasticity. There's going to be a conference about it, I don't know, in Melbourne, okay? Those are great. Those are great because you land, these conferences is usually a conference of a few dozen people, maybe 100 people, and all of them are doing what you're doing and you are interested, and usually they are in places that are kind of secluded and people are expected to attend. Whereas in general conferences, if you're there or you're not there, nobody notices you, nobody knows who you are. In a specific conference, usually they bring people together to a secluded location and people attend all conferences, events, and lectures at the same time. And there's much more room to learn, much more room to get to know more people, and for people to get to know you in return. Finally, there are some conferences that are kind of cross-disciplinary, and usually they tend to be a bit smaller than general conferences, but they are great because they bring together fields in which perhaps you're engaging. So perhaps you're a psychologist, but you're interested in politics. So there's a political psychology conference. Perhaps you're a political scientist, but you're interested in campaigns. So there's a political communication conference. So those are the things that you may want to consider, and especially in a world in which we are talking about getting skills in more than one field. More and more we have people that are doing more than one thing. For instance, as far as myself, I do a bit of political psychology, I do a political communication, I do a bit of biopolitics, meaning the connection between biology and politics. So those are venues you want to explore when you're trying to expand your horizons. Any profession you would go has websites for its conferences. Here are examples from the political science website. So if you go to the Association of Political Science, you'll find the conferences that are the annual conferences and where they take place. You can think ahead and say, wow, I see that it's in Seattle in 2021. I haven't been to Seattle in a while. That's going to be nice. Perhaps I can get a few people to come together. It's going to be wonderful, and I'll present my work there. Great. Other websites offer conferences by location, which is a bit more strategic for people who want to travel. And unfortunately, those conferences tend to be less worth of your time. So I wouldn't spend too much time on those websites. Concentrate on the websites that are in your profession. Write yourself to any listserv of your profession that will offer updates on conferences. Today you can do it also through Twitter. Most organizations have a Twitter account, so you can go to the Twitter account of your organization and you'll know which conferences are coming in. Also on Facebook, most subsections in any profession have a page on Facebook, and they will let you know, oh, do you know that next summer we're doing a conference in Portugal about this? And that's the way to keep up with things and think ahead of your priorities. Finally, getting to the how. So first of all, you have to understand that conferences cost money. And unless you have a nice coffer of dollars at your disposal, you have to find a way to afford it. Most grad students, me included, are broke. So we are living on a small stipend, living in dorms or a rented apartment, and it's really hard to afford all these things. But you should know that there are many ways to afford it. So first of all, sometimes when you're a grad student, the graduate school would fund part of your travels. Sometimes you can ask the dean nicely. You can ask the department to sponsor you, to help you defer some of the costs. Sometimes your advisors have money, research money that they can offer you for travel. Sometimes conferences themselves, for instance, our section grants some students assistance with travel, especially if you're coming from abroad, not from first world countries. So it's a need-based support, but you can ask for the support, and many students in Israel actually get supported. At least they cover part of the flight or part of the hotel, and that's always nice. Furthermore, if you're a TA on a full TA-ship, many times actually by that employment alone, you are secured certain funds for travel, much like faculty have funds for travel. So there is a case that if you're a PhD student and you're TAing, you have perhaps $2,500 to travel. So make sure that you look around, see what's out there, and see if you can afford it. Now, how to do it? All conferences require one of two things. Either you have to submit an abstract or you have to submit a full paper. And it differs by discipline. So for instance, in sociology, I know that they have to submit a full paper to most of the conferences. So by the time you go to the conference already, the job is done. You submitted the paper itself to get accepted. In political science, it works the other way around. You only have to submit, for the most part, an abstract. And therefore, it's a great motivation that if you actually get accepted, you have about 6 months, 4 months to write the paper. And some people actually manage to do it. It's a bit tragic when somebody comes to the conference and says, yeah, I really wanted to get to that data, but I promised data about Congo, but I didn't get money to travel to Congo, so I'm going to tell you something else that I'm doing in the last 4 months. And that's a bit tragic. But you submit the whole thing. So you have to be willing to write the whole thing when you're submitting a full paper, and it's going to be judged as a full paper. When you're doing abstracts, it's especially important that you'll see what's been done in the last few years. You can go to the conference of previous years and just print all the abstracts in your field and see what constitutes a good abstract, what makes it relevant and interesting, see how it's done. And make sure that you provide evidence that you actually did the work. So nobody likes to accept an abstract who says, in the next few months, I'm going to run a survey that's going to study the attitudes of Israelis towards COVID-19. People want to see, when you submit an abstract, a survey of 452 people responded to a COVID-19 attitude. Our findings are, okay? So at least I'll know that you're going to be delivering the paper when you get to the conference and not just mumble that you didn't get the funds and you didn't do the survey. When you submit a paper or you submit an abstract, you should look where to submit it to. Many times you have a topic and that can fit several sections of your profession. Let's say you're a sociologist and you're working in sociology on stratification, meaning differences between groups of people in society. You could submit something on, the effect of COVID-19 on loss of earnings to a certification section, but you can also submit it to perhaps the section that deals with work. There's also a work section. And perhaps you can also submit it to a section that deals with crises, okay? Think where you want to engage with. So which is the crowd that you want to engage with and when you get to the conference, but also be strategic, because perhaps in the stratification section, the acceptance rate is 10%, but perhaps the acceptance rate in the work section is 25. So you have to think also of these considerations when you submit the abstract. Many times in conference, you can submit an abstract to 2 sections. So if one section rejects you, you can get accepted still by the other section. It is wise many times not to send the paper alone. You are quite unknown yet when you submit a paper. Nobody probably knows who you are. Whereas if you're writing a paper with somebody from another university, from another institution, it already gives you a bit of more credibility and gravitas, even if the other person is a grad student like you. But instead of having Israel Wiseman-Manor, the University of Haifa grad student, you have Israel Wiseman-Manor, University of Haifa grad student, and, I don't know, Timothy Smith, the University of Indiana graduate school. That already says, oh, okay, there's a team here. The added value could be better. So you're increasing your chances that perhaps this will happen. Obviously, not all papers are co-authored, but it's something to definitely consider. Another thing that you can do, I'll address some of the questions. I see that there are a few questions. So many sections do publish how many papers are admitted per section. It's not available everywhere, but you can sometimes find it. And the more you'll engage through your profession's Twitter accounts, you'll get more information about such things and opportunities. And people are already saying that there are websites that you can find such things, but usually it's for the general conference. It's not for specific subsections within the conference, but I guess it depends on professions. Another way to try to get in is to organize a panel. By organizing a panel, I mean that you take you approach a few scholars. They could be, it could be a few people that are doing work that's similar to you or that complement your work. And by getting the people together, you get 4 scholars or 4 papers. It could be more scholars, but 4 papers. You could submit to the conference a full panel. A full panel has its advantages and disadvantages. Its advantages is that you already bring together people that the person who's organized the conference, you're saving a lot of time, because this person doesn't have to think, oh, I need to bring 4 papers together to something coherent. You're already presenting something coherent. So let's say you're working right now on, as I said, the effects of COVID-19 on poverty and unemployment. So you get a few people from around the world that are working on a similar topic, and you invite them in. Usually they would say yes, unless they are busy with submitting something they want to submit to this conference. And you can create something that's coherent, and there's going to be lots of names in this when you submit. Obviously, you're not going to ask for grad students at the University of Haifa or the University of Ben Gurion to submit with you. You're going to ask people that are actually known in the field. And then the person who's sitting there and deciding which panels to admit and which not may tilt in your favor. So you're riding on the tails of giants, put it that way. The problem is that many people try to get in this way, and if there's not enough room, sometimes the acceptance rates for full panels are worse than for individual papers. Because if your individual paper is interesting, usually they will find a way to squeeze you in because it's only one paper. Whereas when you submit 4 papers and the chair of that conference doesn't really like it, you're probably going to find yourself out regardless. Okay, I see people are answering the questions in dialogue, which is great. All right. Now, assuming that you passed the hurdle, and you got in. And by the way, there's going to be plenty of time for Q&A later on if you have questions, but I just want to move forward with the process. So at one point you get this email and it starts with the words, dear Mr. So-and-so, this Miss So-and-so, we are glad to inform you that you've been admitted to this amazing conference that's going to take place next year in Lisbon, and we're glad to have you attend. So after a big celebration, because it's fun, and even today we celebrate when we get into a conference, especially a good conference, you have things that you have to do. First of all, immediately start thinking about flights and hotels. You'll be surprised how fast these things get booked. Obviously not in Corona days, but again, we're talking about the post-Corona world. So in a post-Corona world, the comfortable flights and hotels, especially the hotels, get filled quite fast, especially if a conference has a few hotels in which the conference takes place. So people like to reside and sleep in the hotel in which the conference takes place, because it's great that, for instance, there's a boring panel. You can go upstairs to your room, take a nap. You're still jet lagged from flying from Israel. You take a nap, you take a shower, you come back, and you're fresh to go, okay? It's a pain when you're in a conference, let's say in a city like Chicago, and the conference is in the hotels near the coastline, and you have to walk 20 blocks to your shitty hotel, and then you have to go back 20 blocks, and it's raining, and it's windy, and it's miserable. So you want to try to avoid that. So that's the first thing. And if you can, obviously, because you're grad students and you're broke, you want to find people that will share the hotel room with you. And you can ask around either by your social networks on Twitter, Facebook, and see who else got admitted, because immediately everybody got the admittance letter at the same time. I'm looking for somebody who's willing to share my room in whatever, Chicago. These hotels are very expensive. The problem with some of these high-end hotels, besides being expensive, is that you don't get Wi-Fi in your hotel room, which today is a must, right? It's like a drug. We cannot function without Wi-Fi in our rooms. And what you can do many times is you can join their membership programs. It usually doesn't cost anything. And by joining the membership program of that hotel in which you're residing, it could be the Marriott or whatever, they would give you, if you stay enough nights, they would give you a free Wi-Fi as a complimentary thing for being a member. You're still going to pay $220 a night, but if you have a partner, that's $110. If you get free Wi-Fi, that's already tolerable. Now, you've done that. The next thing, and by the way, the flight, make sure that the flight is not the last flight before your presentation. You want to make sure that you arrive early and on time for your presentation. It's always a pain to see somebody coming with shorts and a t-shirts with Mickey Mouse on their shirt and coming, oh, sorry, I just got from the airport. I don't have my notes. I don't have my computer, but I'm going to talk to you about my research. And that's a pain because you wasted an opportunity. So come a day earlier, make sure that you take that comfort zone and arrive a day early. You get a good night's sleep, you get some coffee, shitty coffee at Starbucks, but get some coffee, and you can start your day functioning and get ready for the challenges ahead. Now, you see the program. The program usually is published a few months after the acceptance mail. Go over the program, study it, see what people are presenting, see who are the people that are presenting. You have to seek interesting papers, interesting scholars. Where do you want to be in 10 years? Okay, if you know where you want to be in 10 years, then you can set a path towards that direction and think, okay, the scholars in my field are presenting here and here and here, and the papers that are dealing with my method are in A, B, and C. So I should find a way to make a timetable, and many times you have an app for the conference, to make sure that I get to all the lectures I want to attend. Sometimes it's a bit difficult because the conference spreads across various hotels and you have to rush from one to the other and you'll have to make compromises. But the better planned you are, the better shape you are to later on attend all those things. Perhaps you want to attend the first lecture in one panel and then you want to attend the fourth lecture in another panel. So if you have the app and if you have all the information available, you know that, okay, I can skip this and reach in time to the other hotel and still attend the last conference. And that's going to be great. A great advice that I usually try to follow is to write the damn paper and make the PowerPoint presentation before you board the plane. You'll be surprised how many people count the plane as the main element in which they'll write their paper and the main component where they make their presentation. And it's not the best advice because sometimes those planes are terrible. You're sitting next to somebody who is chatty, and then you arrive to the hotel, and instead of enjoying the evening, going for a stroll in the gay Paris, you're just sitting in your hotel room in Montparnasse, and you have to stay there because you didn't make the PowerPoint presentation. And sometimes you don't have Wi-Fi in your room, and then you cannot make the nice slides that you were thinking because you cannot download anything on your computer. So please do it beforehand. You'll save yourself a lot of time and agony and stress. Another thing that you should do, and some people think that we're beyond that, but you'll be surprised how much it's still in use. Print business cards. You don't need many, 20, 50 business cards that to have with you. Many people still use them, although many people will just say, okay, give me your cell phone, and they just immediately call you, but perhaps your SIM is not working, their SIM is not working, so you can always go to the old method of giving somebody your card. It doesn't cost much, and it's nice to having them. Especially with Asian scholars, it's extremely common to use business cards. It's almost expected before your first greeting. Here's mine, here's yours. You're supposed to collect them just like there were cards when you were a kid and you collected cards of your football, soccer team. So they still use them quite a lot. Another thing has to do with clothing. You have to know your crowd. Before you go to the conference, make sure that you know how people dress for such occasions. And it depends by your profession. If you're going to a conference about Talmud, then this probably is great. You're overdressed for the occasion. Most people in conferences in the humanities are quite casual. And actually, if you'll come with a suit to a conference about the Talmud or about English literature, people are going to look down on you and say, what are you doing here? You belong in a business school meeting or something. On the other hand, you don't want to go too native. If you're attending an anthropology conference, this is not exactly the attire that's fitting for such a conference. But again, it should be something that you're comfortable with, but you don't want to be standing out as somebody who's not following the standards or the norms, because it hurts people's eyes. I remember I went to one of my first conferences in political science, and there was a guy who came with a white suit with stripes, small stripes, and he was a Southern professor with a Southern accent, and he comes to this conference, and you think that he's a plantation owner, and he's going to be hurdle around these slaves, and he's going to just start singing zippity-doo-dah. And people were looking at him and saying, look, you really don't understand the nature of these conferences. You don't necessarily have to come with a suit, with a tie, but you should definitely dress the part and see what other people more or less are dressing. In the last couple of years, I still, because political scientists, especially in my field in American politics, tend to dress and come with a tie and a suit, but I take one for the last 10 years. I think I take a tie and I never use it. I just leave it next to the other clothing. There are two major ways to present in conferences. One is posters. So if you are admitted to a poster session, most likely that you're in a big hall room with at least 50 other people or 100 people, all of them more or less in the same environment. So you're giving a board and they'll tell you how big the board is. Usually it's about 4 by 8 feet. So it's about, 1.5 meters by 3 meters or so. And you're giving the board and you're supposed to print ahead of time your paper, make something visual of it so people can stroll around the exhibit hall where you're standing for the time of usually 1.5 hours or 2 hours. Sorry. And as you're standing there, people can engage with you, ask you questions. These are actual photos I took from a conference about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I don't remember. So as you're standing there, you want to stand out. You want to make your poster shine and people engage with you. You don't want to come, and it's very common. For instance, I noticed many people who study philosophy, political theory. So they come with a paper of 25 pages and they just take 25 pins and they put page after page of their paper as if I'm going to read 25 pages of font 12 Times New Roman paper from a wall. You just want to make something visual, lots of visuals, a bit of text, just to get people engaged. And sometimes actually those engagements are great because somebody comes and they're just strolling around and they ask you a few questions, they give you some comments, and sometimes those engagements can be more meaningful than perhaps presenting at 8 a.m. on a Sunday in which you're presenting to yourself because nobody came. So that's one way. The more common way to present is through panels. So usually panels are scheduled for time slots that are usually 1.5 hours, in which 4 or 5 people, or 4 or 5 papers, because it could be 25 people. In the natural sciences, sometimes you have a paper with, 10, 15 co-authors. So 4 or 5 papers are given around 50 minutes to present, and then they open it up for Q&A from the crowd. And you have to come ready. You have to come ready when you're making your presentation, not to bomb that presentation, make that presentation something that you benefit from in terms of getting good feedback, in terms of getting good comments on your work, perhaps suggestions for improvement, suggestions for better data or better methodology. It could be connections, people telling you, you may want to check that person out, or somebody perhaps in the crowd himself says, you know what, I'm working on something similar, perhaps we can cooperate on this, or perhaps we can engage with this together. So you want to shine in those moments. And unfortunately, the problem is that many times when you prepare for something, you think, oh, this is going to be great. Looking at the left side, this is from, I don't know if you are familiar with the PhD Comics. Those of you who have not visited the website of PhD Comics, go. This is your life. This is your life and the agony of it as a PhD student. So you plan ahead, you have your things ready, and when your time comes, you're the last speaker. I'm Wiseman-Manor, so usually I'm last in the speaker series. And the people before me spoke too much, and I get the chair saying, you know what, if we're running out of time, instead of 15 minutes, how about you do it in 8? And I have to do the whole presentation in 8 minutes, and I have to rush through, and suddenly the PowerPoint presentation doesn't go well, and there's, something happened. So you have to prepare for the worst and try to expect the worst and try to do your best. because people will, if you do good, people will remember you for the quality of your presentation. And if you'll do badly, then people also will remember, oh, that's that student from Israel that really didn't know what he was saying, or that kept talking with that weird accent that I couldn't understand what he was saying. So beware of that, be prepared when you're making the presentation. And you don't have to be a natural in presenting stuff. People always say, especially in Israel, our prime minister, his favorite politician is Churchill. And Churchill is considered one of the best public speakers in the history of the British Parliament. And people think always, oh, you should try to be like a Churchill. Churchill, to be Churchill, used to, every time that he would have to address the public or give a talk at Parliament, he would plan ahead 30 minutes before in front of a mirror, and he would stand in front of the mirror and he would practice. He would practice how he would present himself, the diction of it, the pauses of it, the gestures with his hands. He would practice a lot, and practice makes perfect. So if you're not familiar with public speaking, if you feel uncomfortable, especially that it's not your first language, videotape yourself. Just take a camera, shoot yourself doing it, and practice until you make it flawless, until people understand you, until the slides merge well with what you want to say, with your arguments. You want people, it's just like with your clothing, you want people to concentrate on your work. You don't want people to be concentrating on your accent, on your hand movements, on the fact that your attire doesn't fit, or that your slides are sloppy. You want people to concentrate on your work, and you have to do the best you can. You get only 10 minutes, 12 minutes to present it. Work on it, okay? It's worth the effort. Now, in terms of networking, when it comes to networking, as I said, you have to understand that sometimes people feel weird about networking because they feel, oh, this is the ugly part of the profession. This is like the wishy-washy, the connections, and I want to be judged by my merit of my work, not because I know somebody. But everybody does it. Senior people are doing it to younger people. Younger people are doing it to senior people. Senior people are doing it with senior people, and young people are doing it with young people. When you're in the conference, everybody's networking all the time. Everybody's doing it. So don't feel bad about it, because when you're doing it to somebody else, they're doing it to you. And you'll see it in the conference the minute you attend and you put your tag on your name, the name tag on your shirt, on your skirt, or wherever you're dressed, people immediately, the first thing you see, people are getting closer to you, you're walking towards one another, and immediately the look goes like this and up. And if there's something of interest, I see, Harvard Business Law School, whatever, interesting. I may engage a bit more. Israel? No. Okay. So people are doing it all the time, and you have to try and break the ice to connect with other people. And there are certain ways to do it. First of all, get to know your panelists. The first network that you can create very easily during a conference is to get to know the panelists beforehand. So Google them, see what they're writing about, what they're doing, the discussant, the chair. And then when you come to the conference, you say, hey, hi, Joe. Yes, I read your paper. I love the way you analyzed whatever. You find a compliment for something that they've done. Or perhaps you have a suggestion for what they're doing, an improvement. At least you get engaged with. It doesn't have to be even about the data. You can see, oh yeah, I've seen you've done this study about India. You know, I was in Mumbai actually 3 months ago, and it was really interesting. Blah blah blah. Okay. Another thing that you can do is, if you know that certain people are going to be there because you looked at the program, and you know that somebody that you're working using their method, or perhaps you're using their data, or perhaps you like the way they think about your topic is useful, then perhaps you can email that person and say, dear Professor so-and-so, my name is Cynthia, and I'm working on this project with Professor so-and-so here in Israel. I would very much appreciate the time to talk to you about this project, or perhaps you have time for a cup of coffee. And many times these people, if you engage with something that's interesting to them, and they see that you're following their footsteps, they may be willing to play along. So there's no penalty to trying. At worst, that person would not answer your email, or he would just say, look, I'm busy, okay? And that's it, but at least you try. Another thing that you can do is ask your advisors to try and connect you with certain people. So your advisors usually are people that are already known in their own field. I hope they are known in their own field, and they have their own connections, and many times they go to these conferences. So you don't want to be like glued to your chair all the time, but you do want to, at one event or so, ask your advisor to say, look, I really would like to get to know that person. Can you introduce us? And I can tell you from my experience, I do it all the time. When I attend conferences with students, even not my own students, students from political science that know me, and somebody tells me, do you know this guy? Can you introduce us? Sure. It's what you're expected to do as somebody who's senior. Go to public events. There are receptions, there are keynote speeches, there are workshops around the conference. Try to attend as many as possible, because that's where you start seeing people in these events, and you get to engage with people and get to see who are the senior people, the less senior people, learn what's important, what are the main discussions around the profession are. And usually these events are free, sometimes even there's free drinks, so there's more reason to go, usually not free alcohol, but free drinks. And you should go. You should go to these events as many as possible. There's also working groups and sections. So for instance, let's say you're an economist and you're working on behavioral economics, okay? So there's a meeting at the American Economics Association meeting. There's a section that meets to talk about the work of behavioral economics, and they all are there. They all come and grant awards to the best paper of the year, the best book of the year. You should go to those meetings and start engaging with that crowd. At first you come as a non-senior person, you're just nobody, but that's how you start. You attend these things, and perhaps after 2 or 3 years, somebody would come to you and say, hey, I know you. Would you be willing to serve at the best graduate paper award? That's how I started, okay? And then you move on and forward. Go to panels where people that you want to meet are likely to be, okay? Because sometimes a good engagement with people comes along after a panel about a topic that is of interest to you, and there's going to be there a few of the people that are working on the same field as you, and perhaps a small talk during the panel, or an engagement, a smart Q&A that you attended or you participated in. You gave a smart comment, allows you at the end of the panel to just, shake hands, get to know some people and say, oh, I'm so-and-so. I have the worst intro because I always have to say I'm Israel from Israel, which is a bit of a pain. But it's better than I'm United States from the United States. But you just go and present yourself, shake hands with somebody and say to this professor, dear Professor Ellen, I enjoyed very much your paper, and thank you for whatever. And you start. Again, you cannot be shy all the time. Another thing, in those conferences, there's going to be tons of grad students just like yourselves. And at first, if you're strategic playing this, you're thinking, why I'm here for only 4 days. I want to be strategic about it. I want to spend most of my time trying to cater to the senior professors, to the big names. But think about it. These grad students are the ones who are working on the most interesting topics, much more interesting than the senior people. These are the people that are going to be your co-authors in the future. These are the people who are going to be the ones who are going to judge your papers when you send them for review. These are the people who are going to be the ones who will have to write letters of recommendation for you when tenure comes along, because they're going to be already professors at universities across the United States and Europe. So there's a lot to learn from these people, and you want to get to know many of these people also for social purposes. These are your people. These are the people you want to engage with. These are the people that are doing the fun stuff that you like to do. And it's great to just engage with these individuals. And I can tell you that after a few conferences, they become your friends. They become people that you actually share with them your griefs and your sorrows, and you attend their weddings and they attend your weddings. And whenever you have a draft of a paper, you send them to them because you trust their honesty and their qualifications. So remember, that's the people you start with. Many of my friends in the profession, I cannot tell you exactly the moment we met in a conference, but today we meet once a year in the same conference, and we're like, hey, what's happening? How's your kids? My kids, and we follow each other on Facebook and stuff like that. And another thing is go to the exhibit hall. There's always an exhibit hall in which you can find, for instance, books in the profession. So there's lots of small talk to be done as you're gazing at the latest books in your profession, the latest work in your profession. It's good to go there as well. And finally, try to spend time also in public areas. There's areas of seating. There's areas of next to wherever people are engaging, in which it's the best opportunity to, perhaps you met somebody yesterday in a talk. Today you're both sitting next to each other, and you say, hey, I noticed you from the conference yesterday. Hi, I'm Israel. How about you? Hi. And no better place in conferences than next to the Holy Shrine, which is Starbucks. And if it's not Starbucks, it's a Boston Best, or it's Pete's, or whatever. Wherever you are, people gather around the coffee places and just, you start casual conversations. There's nothing, especially in America, that they love to talk more than about coffee. Oh, I cannot drink coffee. It wakes me up too much. Oh, I drank coffee yesterday and I couldn't sleep, and so forth. It's immediately starting a conversation with colleagues about something neutral that can lead to other things. Obviously, you don't want to be a stalker. I don't suggest that if you see, hey, that's Professor so-and-so, I'm seeing rushing to the Starbucks, I'm going to run fast, so I'm going to be the first person next to him in line to get the coffee. I'm not suggesting that, but you can definitely engage with people as they're going around their business of being casual. Almost done. When you meet people, there's a thing called the meet. And the meet, basically, you should follow the rule of Inigo Montoya. I hope all of you watched the Princess Bride. And the meet is very simple. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. That's all you need to know about the meet, which basically means you have to, first of all, offer a polite greeting. Okay. The second stage is telling who you are. The third element is provide some relevant connection between the two. Not necessarily that he killed your father, but you're working on the same field, you read his paper, you attended his talk yesterday, or you're going to attend his talk tomorrow, okay? And lead to something. Perhaps would you like to drink some coffee? Or can I interest you in attending my talk tomorrow? And so forth. So that's what you're expected to do. And in those occasions in which you meet people, you're going to be sometimes asked by, especially senior people, but not just senior people, you're going to be asked to present your work. And you should be ready to present your work with a very fast pitch. And the pitch should be related to how much time you're going to have time with this person. If you're just standing in line on Starbucks and you're about to get your coffee and you have 10 seconds or 30 seconds, you should be able to tell in 10 seconds who you are and what your dissertation is about, or your research is about. You should be prepared to do it in 10 seconds, 30 seconds, and sometimes in 5 minutes. Because sometimes both of you attended a panel and you arrived too early, and you're both 10 minutes early to your panel. And casually you're sitting next to each other and the person asks you, so what are you working on? What's your thing? So if you see that there's time, you can be elaborate and tell more about your methods, about your data, who's your advisor, what's your training, but you should be able to do it automatically, okay? And again, practice, practice, practice. Now, you got back. You finished your conference. It was a great success. Everybody told you you're amazing, and you think you're amazing, and that's great. First of all, get some sleep. Don't do anything while you're still jet lagged. However, you promised some people to send the paper. Even if you just, the person told you, you know what, when you get home, why don't you send me that paper? And you know he didn't really mean it, okay? Still send the paper. At worst, he will read it, or at least acknowledge you and say, well, thanks for sending it. Hopefully I'll read it in the next few weeks. Fine. You can always send an email after a month saying, did you read my paper? And if not, that's okay, just wanted to know. But you're already engaged, okay? There's a dialogue of emails between the two of you. If you told somebody that you really want to read this paper, then after the conference, email that person and says, hey, Kathleen, I really want to read your paper. Can you send me that paper? That's the best compliment an academic can get, that somebody wants to read your work. The discussant and the panelist especially the discussant who bothered to read your paper in the conference, thank that person for reading your paper, for providing comments, and you should do that. Get reimbursements. Make sure you keep all those receipts, because if without them, you won't get your money back from the university or from your department and so forth. You have to file some information, sometimes during the conference and after the conference, to get reimbursed. And finally, apply to the next conference, okay? You got in, you made it, celebrate that and start anew, because you always need more conferences, more adventures, more things to present and learn. So without further ado, thank you, and let's open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, ישראל. הגט קראוס אומרת, תראה, הרבה פעמים לא מקבלים פידבק במושבים, כדאי לקחת את זה בחשבון, ולא להיעלב, ולהבין שזה המצב. אני חושב שאתה תסכים איתה.
Yeah, so I'll pass it on to English. Yes, sometimes you don't get the feedback you want. Sometimes you expect that you're gonna be blown by the feedback you get, and sometimes the only feedback you get is that, that's nice, really nice work, thank you. And one of the times you can go to a conference and you attend, there's only like 5 people in the crowd. Sometimes there's nobody in the crowd. I attended sometimes conferences in which it was 8 a.m. on a Sunday, and we presented to ourselves. So the panelists were presenting to the other panelists with nobody in the crowd. And it was a bit sad and pathetic even, but actually we got into a nice engagement with each other, which was kind of nice. But sometimes, yeah, it doesn't mean that when you attend the conference, the best comments on your work are gonna be in the presentation itself. Sometimes it could be over coffee. You're just talking to somebody casually and you're telling them, you know, tomorrow I'm presenting this, or yesterday I presented this. And somebody would tell you, oh, you know, I'm working on similar topics. You perhaps should look in this paper. It would save you a lot of trouble or a lot of time. And that's going to be your best comment in the conference. And you should be prepared that that's the highlight, academic highlight of your conference in terms of feedback. But again, you don't go to conferences just to learn about your work. You go to learn about the work of others. So it's every time I come back from a conference, I'm like, boom, my mind explodes from so many ideas, and I write them down and I never get to 95% of them, but I'm so excited to see so much good work done and amazing projects and amazing colleagues that are doing things that are so interesting. And also people that are so bad and I'm suddenly feel good about myself, that I'm not that bad myself, that it's great. You come with lots of energy back from conferences.
There was before there was one question regarding maybe when we are young, shouldn't we go for minor conferences, not those big and very
prestigious. You should go to both. You should go to both. There's no reason not to go if you get accepted. Obviously, perhaps at first you can go to the big conferences just as somebody who attends them instead of presenting there, just to get a feel of what it's like, so you feel less intimidated.